Alright guys, this is your commissioner with the week 2 performance reviews. If you guys look on the league page, we have updated power rankings for the week. The biggest movers in this week's power ranking polls, Ray Sr. and Philip each moved up 4 spots, and Ray has fallen 5 spots in this week's poll. Now moving on to the matchups. The start, we had myself versus Dakota. Previous week's number 1 and number 2 teams in the power rankings. Clearly, that's not the case anymore. My team got whooped 125-91. Jordy Nelson and the Vikings defense were really the only bright spots on my team for the week. I decided to go with Stafford over Palmer, which ended up being a very poor choice on my part. And also, my running back, Arian Foster, got hurt, which is not a surprise. As we all know, he gets hurt all the time. So, something I knew prior to drafting him. Out of Dakota's team, he had Matt Ryan, Kelvin Benjamin, D'Angelo Williams, and LeGarrette Blount, all with very big days. Matt Ryan and Kelvin Benjamin have each looked very good through the first 2 weeks of the season. Wasn't sure how Kelvin Benjamin would do coming off of the injury from last year, but he is definitely right back in the stride of things. Also with D'Angelo Williams on his team, D'Angelo Williams has been a number 1 running back so far in fantasy for the year, and that'll likely repeat itself again this week. But Le'Veon Bell is coming back in week 4. And that means D'Angelo Williams is going to likely be on the bench. He might get 6 to 8 carries a game, but majority of that workload is going to be on Le'Veon Bell's shoulders. So just kind of sucks to see somebody so talented be on that team when, he's stuck behind the number 1 running back when he could probably be at least the top 15 back in the league on any other team. Moving on to David versus Philip. Philip beat him pretty bad, 126-77. David had no big performers on his team except for Justin Tucker, the kicker, with 15 points. He has Doug Martin, who has suffered an injury and will likely be out 2 to 3 weeks with that. Odell Beckham Jr. has kind of struggled this year. No touchdowns yet. So we'll see if he can pick that up this week versus the Redskins. A tough matchup with Josh Norman there. He did have a lot of points left on his bench. Also had Melvin Gordon on the bench, who had another solid week. Obviously I would recommend putting him in the lineup moving forward. Clearly, if you don't care for Melvin Gordon, I will definitely trade you for him and take him on my squad. Philip had 7 players with double-digit points. Also, he played 4 receivers this week. The 3 you have to play and the 1 in the flex. And all those receivers all had double-digit points for him. Just overall, a very good performance out of Philip's team for the week. Probably the most intriguing matchup of the week was Ray versus Garrett. They did have the closest game with an 8-point victory for Garrett. I know going into Monday night, Garrett didn't have a big lead on him, and Ray had Adrian Peterson. As we all know, Peterson tore his meniscus and his LCL in his knee and is likely done for the season. So did not get enough points for Ray, and in the long run caused him to likely lose that matchup. For Ray's team, obviously his running back struggled with Peterson not getting a lot of points, but also playing Travis Cadet, who didn't do much for him. Some injuries on Ray's team, suspended quarterback, so not a lot of wiggle room for him to really make some adjustments there. He did have a bright spot with Travis Benjamin getting him 26 points. He is now the number 1 receiver in San Diego with Keenan Allen being out for the year, so we can probably expect some pretty solid and big games out of him. Garrett Baker had Cam Newton and DeMarco Murray all with some solid games. Cam with 30, DeMarco with 18. Broncos defense had 23 points. Garrett did run with 2 tight ends this week, playing a tight end in the flex position as well. Not a lot of points out of either one, but it didn't matter. He was still able to get the victory. He did have Giovanni Bernard on the bench, who got him 20 points this week. Moving on to Michael versus George. George got the 18-point victory in that matchup. Outside of the Panthers defense and maybe Ezekiel Elliott, nothing really good out of Michael's team this week. Thomas Rawls, once again, struggling. I know he left the game with an injury, but overall, that entire Seahawks offense is struggling this year. Some pretty poor play out of their offensive line. Can't block the run, can't block the pass. So, all the players on that offense are not producing fantasy-wise. He did have Mike Wallace on the bench, who did put up 18 points this week. Moving on to George's team, DeAndre Hopkins, Blake Bortles, Ryan Matthews led the way for his team there. Also, the Houston Texans had a pretty solid week. Eddie Lacy and Doug Baldwin are struggling for him. Once again, another Seattle player, so no surprise there. And Eddie Lacy, Packers kind of struggled overall as a team in their Sunday night game, but Lacy is not really recovered from his efforts last year, so not sure if he's going to be able to get out of this, long slump he's been in or not, but we'll wait and see how that goes. Moving on to Ray Sr. and Shane. Ray Sr. 112, Shane 80. Obviously just rounding up on some of the scores to make things easier. Ray Sr. had 5 players with double-digit points this week. 2 players were just shy of double-digit points. C.J. Anderson and Will Snead, the receiver with the Saints, have both looked very good so far this season, so a couple good picks there. Did have Isaiah Crowell on the bench with just over 21 points. Also, more news on his team. Josh Gordon, he has him on the bench. He has been served a warrant for his arrest today for failing to show up for a paternity test. So we'll see how that affects his team and his status with the league moving forward. Currently, the NFL has said he is still eligible to return in Week 5. So we'll see if that holds true or not. Shane's team, he has Alex Smith at quarterback. Did well for him last week, not so much this week. Lots of injuries on Shane's team this week. Danny Woodhead is out for the season with a torn ACL. Jonathan Stewart is hampered with a hamstring injury. He's likely going to miss this week, maybe another 1 or 2 more. Dante Moncrief fractured his shoulder and is out, I believe, 4 to 6 weeks. He does have Le'Veon Bell on his bench, and he has to wait 1 more week to have him in there. Obviously, I believe he's the number 1 running back in the NFL. So, having him back will be a big boost to that team. But with all the injuries and some of the poor play, it may benefit him to, try to trade Bell to get, 2 or 3, pretty solid players in return to, try to have a pretty solid team there. Moving on to the last matchup, we have Joseph versus Dalton. Joseph led the league in scoring this week with 156 points. Dalton was able to put up 100. Joseph had 6 players with double-digit points, 3 players with over 20 points. Matt Forte with a 30-point performance, 3 touchdowns there in their Thursday night game to start off the week for him in a very big way. Stephon Diggs showed up, 29 points out of him. He's looked very solid this year. I believe right now he's currently the number 2 receiver in fantasy. And Joseph's team, led the league in scoring, put up this huge performance, all with Gronkowski on the bench. As soon as Gronk is healthy, I don't care who the quarterback is in New England. I mean, he's a flat-out stud. It could be Brady, Garoppolo, Brissett. It's probably not going to matter. He's still going to produce a little more with Brady as their offense can move the ball a little bit more, but still a very solid player there, and, we'll see if he gets him back this week. Out of Dalton's team, what do I have written here? Phillip Rivers and Eric Decker both looked good this week. Antonio Brown kind of struggled. I mean, people, they can't play well every week. I still think he's a stud, and I'm sure he'll be fine moving forward. Mark Ingram has not really performed very well so far this year. Not really sure what's going on with that. I own him in a league, so I'm hoping he can kind of snap out of it. I'm a little concerned with the situation there. Obviously, they have a very good offense, but I don't understand how he's not producing more. They're not really running the ball a ton. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. He did have Sterling Shepard on the bench with just over 15 points, so looking pretty solid there. To cover the biggest, basically the start of the week, it kind of boiled down to two players, but I really think I'm going to have to give the start of the week to Dakota, playing LeGarrette Blount with 18 points. Pretty solid performance there, just edging out, I would say, Travis Benjamin, who put up 26 points this week. I would say the worst starts of the week or the worst plays of the week, it's going to, it has to go to David playing the Raiders defense. They got -6 points, so very poor performance there. And runner-up to that would have been Thomas Rawls with just over 2 points. I do want to make some comments on the free agency waiver wire this week. We did have quite a bit of people bid for Jacob Tamme. I was the one who ended up ultimately winning him, outbidding 3 people. And I also was able to outbid one person for Jerick McKinnon. With Adrian Peterson being out, he is likely next in line to get a bulk of the work, along with Matt Asiata, who will probably get some of the goal line work. And I believe they also signed Ronnie Hillman today, so we'll see how that cuts into the workload there. Ray was able to outbid Joseph for Corey Coleman this week. It's kind of funny because Corey Coleman broke his hand in practice this week, or actually today. So, that money that you kind of spent on him is probably wasted, as he's probably going to have to miss a month of games. I also believe Joseph bid $15 for Fozzie Whitaker and Kenyon Drake. Nobody else bid on either one of those players, so kind of overbid on them, I guess. But we'll see if that ends up working out for him this year. That's all I got for you guys this week. Good luck this week in your matchups, unless you're playing me, and see how things go.